the door. You're in trouble. Declan Barrett died. It's here.
Put them back! What is this? I had plans. I'm going to see too.
Just like it seems like it had a fall.
In a quiet village, there lived a woman named Dani. She was busy fixing up her old house, making it cozy and nice. Her husband, Ted, was a psychiatrist who worked at a hospital. Their new home was in a place where the phone signal was weak, which made Dani feel a bit lonely. One day, while Dani was working hard on the house, she found a spot with good phone service. Excited, she called Ted to chat because she was feeling bored. Unfortunately, Ted had to stay late at the hospital that night. This meant Dani would be all alone in the big house. As night fell, Dani decided to set up a tent by the door so she could sleep outside. It was dark and quiet when suddenly a stranger appeared at the door. He looked through the window and called out to her. "Please open the door. Your life is in danger. Someone wants to hurt you," he warned. Dani felt scared and didn't want to let him in. She thought it was silly to trust someone she didn't know. The stranger spoke sweetly and seemed worried about her safety. He even said, "If you don't believe me, call the police. You really are in danger." Dani stood by the door, unsure whether to open it or not. But then, without showing us what happened next, the story cut to a scene where we saw something terrible happen. The stranger attacked someone with an eye patch. It turned out that Dani had also been killed by this man who had tricked her. Fast forward a few months later, and we see Ted visiting an antique shop filled with old treasures. This shop belonged to Darcy, Dani's twin sister. Darcy had been blind since she was little, but had special powers that allowed her to sense things others couldn't, like ghosts and strange happenings. She was very sad about Dani's death. Ted often visited Darcy, but didn't believe her when she talked about her special abilities. One day, while holding a small bell, Darcy told Ted that this bell was connected to a boy who had died unfairly. She could feel his presence through it. Ted had come to bring Darcy something special, a handkerchief that belonged to the eye patch man who had hurt Dani. Darcy wanted to use it to find out why he did such a terrible thing and what he was planning now. As they talked, Darcy sensed something else too. Ted had started seeing another woman and planned to marry her soon, even though Dani had just passed away not long ago. Darcy felt sad, but she tried not to show it. Ted was talking to her about a friend he had known for a long time. He said, "I need some support, so we decided to get married. She works at the hospital with me." After saying this, he left. But we could see that Ted's visit to the hospital that night was really about his friend. This meant he was already being unfaithful to Dani. Later that evening, Darcy went back to her house. She brought with her the handkerchief from the man with the fake eye. She placed it on the table and, after taking off her gloves, touched it. Suddenly she saw something shocking that made her very scared. Tears filled her eyes. Darcy then went to a storeroom where she kept a big wooden box. She looked at it carefully before sitting next to it. The room was filled with strange things connected to people who were no longer alive, and Darcy could feel their presence. Meanwhile, Ted woke up and was getting ready to leave for the hospital. His friend stopped him and showed him some pictures on a camera. This camera belonged to Dani and could take pictures by itself. To Ted's surprise, one picture showed a shadow that looked like Dani, even though she had been gone for a while. Ted tried to ignore it, but his friend found it odd. That night, as Ted did his duty at the hospital, his friend would have to stay alone in the house where Dani had died. She felt scared and told Ted she preferred to stay at her own home until his shift changed. Ted agreed, but reminded her it was just for a few days. Before Ted left for work, his friend mentioned that Darcy had sent a strange gift, a big wooden box. They were both surprised when they saw Darcy standing outside their door. No one had invited her. She had come on her own and planned to stay for 2 days. Ted's friend wasn't happy about this, but Ted couldn't say no. Darcy then showed them the wooden box, which held a large wooden statue inside. When Ted's friend saw it, she felt uneasy. Ted explained, "When Darcy leaves, I will move this statue out of the way. Just bear with me until she is gone." After that, Ted left for work. A little while later, Ted's friend prepared to leave too, but realized she had lost her keys. She searched everywhere but couldn't find them. Meanwhile, Darcy sat comfortably as if she already knew what would happen next. When the friend couldn't find her keys, Darcy asked her, "Aren't you going to leave now?" The friend replied no and realized she would have to stay in the house after all. After a while, Ted's friend came into the room and noticed the big wooden statue from the box sitting on the dining table. She felt uneasy and asked Darcy, "Did you bring this out?" Darcy replied in a strange way, "No," which made Ted's friend wonder how it got there. She tried to push the thought aside and went to prepare some food for Darcy. As they ate, Ted's friend asked Darcy about her job. When Darcy explained what she did, Ted's friend laughed inside. She thought Darcy was a bit like a witch who believed in magic. Then Darcy asked, "How do you feel in this house?" Ted's friend replied, "I don't feel good here, especially after what happened to your sister." This made Darcy curious. Darcy then asked her, "If a stranger knocked on your door asking for help, would you open it?" The friend said firmly, "No, I'm not that foolish." Hearing this made Darcy angry. "My sister wasn't foolish either," she said. "She didn't open the door. It wasn't the man with the fake eye who killed her. It was someone else." Ted's friend was puzzled and asked, "If it wasn't that man, then who killed her?" Darcy replied, "It was a male nurse who works at the same hospital as Ted." This shocked Ted's friend. Suddenly, we flash back to that night when Dani was home alone. We see that Dani really did not open the door when the man with the fake eye came to help her. Instead, a masked man entered the house and killed her mercilessly. Back in the present, Ted's friend called Ted and told him about Darcy's strange claims. She says Dani wasn't killed by the man with the fake eye, but by a nurse at your hospital. "I don't feel safe here," she said. She added that she couldn't leave because she had lost her car keys. Ted tried to calm her down and told her to lock her door and get some sleep. Later, she went to her room but couldn't fall asleep. She came downstairs and found Darcy sleeping on the sofa. Quietly, she approached the wooden statue to see what secrets it held. As she checked it out, she noticed 5 holes in its head. One hole had a picture of Dani, another had a tooth, and one held a small bottle of blood. Just then, Darcy woke up and angrily said, "Put everything back." Startled, Ted's friend quickly returned the items to their places in the statue's head. After she left, Darcy sat in front of the statue all night while Ted's friend felt scared. To distract herself, she started watching videos on Dani's camera. Suddenly, she saw a scary face behind Dani. Terrified, she dropped the camera and looked around to find Dani's ghost in a corner of the room. Frightened out of her wits, she finally found her keys and rushed out of the house. Next, we see Ted at the hospital, talking with his friend, the male nurse who had been involved in Dani's death. They seemed close as they chatted. When Ted returned home later that night, he found Darcy sitting sadly at the table. When he asked about his friend, Darcy replied coldly that she had run away. "I wanted her to see your true self," she said. "You are disgusting. You killed my sister because you wanted her money." Ted was shocked and tried to defend himself. "I loved Dani," he insisted. But Darcy didn't believe him. She warned him that he would send someone to kill her next. Ted suggested they go see a detective about Dani's case to clear things up. But Darcy still didn't trust him. He left his phone behind and went to find the detective. Meanwhile, we flash back again to see Ted sitting with the nurse as they plotted how to kill Dani for money. It became clear that Ted had fallen for his friend and only cared about getting Dani's wealth. He never truly loved her. The nurse had been persuaded by Ted to carry out the terrible act because he enjoyed hurting people. As for the man with the fake eye, he was not evil. He just wanted to help Dani that night, but was misled by Ted and the nurse into thinking he could save her. Dani didn't believe the man who warned her, and sadly, she was killed. Darcy, her sister, was furious and took revenge on that man. She told everyone, "I made him pay for what he did." Meanwhile, Ted was plotting to kill Darcy as well. Before leaving, he secretly removed a tile from the floor. His plan was for Darcy to fall when she went to answer the phone. He had also asked the nurse to help him with this plan, and the nurse agreed happily. When Ted called the house, Darcy went to pick up the phone just as planned. As she stepped forward, she fell through the gap where the tile had been removed. The nurse arrived soon after and saw the wooden statue first, then looked at Darcy, who was badly hurt with a deep head injury. There was so much blood that she quickly lost consciousness. But here's where things got really strange. Darcy believed in magic and rituals, and she knew her death would complete a special ritual, so she didn't even try to save herself. As soon as she died, something amazing happened. The wooden statue suddenly came to life. It chased after the nurse and attacked him. The nurse managed to escape but fainted from fear. When he woke up, he found himself tied to a hospital bed with Ted standing over him. Ted blamed the nurse for Darcy's death. The nurse begged, "Please don't tell anyone. I promise I won't say a word." But Ted just laughed and said, "If I let you go, people will wonder why I didn't see how crazy you are. If I keep you here, no one will believe you anyway. Who would think a wooden puppet came to life?" This showed us that Ted was selfish and deceitful. He used everyone around him, even his own wife. Though Darcy could have killed the nurse right away, she wanted to make him suffer like he made others suffer when he was a nurse. Then something surprising happened. A patient appeared to take revenge on the nurse. He bit the nurse's finger hard, causing him great pain. Meanwhile, Ted returned home looking worried. He noticed the bell that Darcy had mentioned before. Curious, he rang it to call the spirit of the boy it was connected to. But nothing happened, making Ted think there might be no such thing as magic after all. Maybe Darcy was just tricking everyone. We also learned that Ted's friend had left him too. In this way, Darcy's revenge on Ted was complete. His life was falling apart. Then came a shocking moment. The spirit of the boy connected to the bell appeared next to Ted. This meant that Ted's time was running out too. And just like that, the story came to an end, leaving us wondering what would happen next in this tale of deceit and revenge.